The best gift is the day when you're gone. My daughter told me that. At first, I thought they were just cruel words, but soon I realized they meant something much darker. The words pierced through me like a knife. The best gift is the day when you're gone. My own daughter said that to me, looking me straight in the eyes, with a tone so cold it made the air in the room heavier. I had never thought I'd live long enough to hear such cruelty from the person I once carried in my arms, sang lullabies to, and worked my whole life to support. My name is Edward Harris. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how betrayal by blood can break a man, yet, in the end, make him stronger. The day started ordinary. I woke up early, as always, brewed my morning coffee in the old porcelain cup my late wife loved so much. The sun came through the dusty curtains, reminding me of gentler times. My daughter, Emily, and her husband, Tom, had been living with me for a while. After my wife passed away, the house felt too big, too empty. I thought having family around would bring warmth back into these walls. Instead, it brought coldness I wasn't prepared for. At first, it was small things. Emily avoiding dinner with me, claiming she was busy. Tom making snide remarks about the house being outdated and how soon it'll belong to younger hands. I laughed them off, thinking it was just their way of adjusting. But deep inside, I noticed the shift, the respect I once had from my own child slowly melting away. That morning, Emily stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, frustration painted across her face. She told me I was a burden, that my presence was suffocating her new life. And then, she spat out those words, "The best gift is the day when you're gone." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my chest. I wanted to shout, to remind her of all the sacrifices I had made, how I worked double shifts just so she could study at the best schools, how I skipped meals to make sure she never went hungry. But the words died in my throat. Instead, I quietly placed my cup down on the counter. The porcelain clink echoed louder than her voice. She turned away, as if I were already invisible. I walked back to my room, trembling. Every step felt heavier than the last. The pictures on the wall stared at me, memories of birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Her smile in those photographs felt like a stranger's. As I sat on my bed, staring at the floor, I realized something painful. This house was no longer mine. It was theirs. And maybe, just maybe, they were planning something much worse than words. Because when your own child says she can't wait for the day you're gone, sometimes she means more than just death. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words kept circling in my head, echoing in the silence of my old bedroom. The best gift is the day when you're gone. They were more than just a cruel sentence. They were a verdict. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the muffled sounds of Emily and Tom laughing downstairs. Their laughter wasn't the kind that warmed a house. It was sharp, almost mocking. And for the first time in my life, I felt like an intruder in my own home. The next morning, I came into the kitchen quietly. Tom was already there, sipping coffee from a mug that used to be mine. He didn't even look at me when he muttered, "We need more space, Richard. This house wasn't built for 3 generations." I forced a polite smile, though my chest tightened. "It's my house, Tom. Built with my own hands, brick by brick." He finally looked up, smirking. For now, his words weren't careless, they were calculated. And that terrified me more than Emily's cruelty. Later that day, I overheard them talking in the living room. They didn't know I was standing by the door. Emily's voice was low but firm. "He's old, Tom. He won't last forever. And when he's gone, this house will be ours. We just need to be patient." Tom chuckled. "Or we speed things up." I froze. My heart dropped. My own daughter, planning my absence as if it were a gift she couldn't wait to unwrap. I wanted to burst in, to confront them, but I couldn't move. My legs were heavy, my throat dry. I backed away and went out into the garden. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under my shoes. The oak tree I planted with Emily when she was 6 still stood tall, its branches reaching for the sky. She used to call it our tree. I remember her little hands digging into the soil, laughing as dirt smeared her cheeks. And now? Now that same daughter wished for the day I'd disappear. I sat on the wooden bench, clutching my knees. My mind raced. Was I imagining things? Maybe they were just joking, exaggerating. But the look in Tom's eyes this morning wasn't a joke. It was hunger. That evening, Emily barely acknowledged me at dinner. She scrolled through her phone while Tom spoke loudly about renovations he'd like to do once things change. I asked carefully, "What do you mean by that?" He grinned, his eyes locking onto mine. "You'll see soon enough." I didn't sleep again that night. For the first time, I locked my bedroom door. Because when the people you love most start treating you like a problem, sometimes they're already planning the solution. By the third night, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards outside my door sent shivers down my spine. I kept my old cane leaning against the bed, not just for walking, but as the only defense I had left. The next morning, I decided to test something. I left my wallet on the coffee table before going out to the garden. When I returned an hour later, one of the $100 bills was missing. I didn't say a word, but when I glanced at Tom, his smirk told me everything I needed to know. That evening, Emily finally confronted me directly. "Dad," she began, her voice cold, "we've been talking. This arrangement isn't working. You should consider moving into a care home. It'll be better for everyone." "Better for you, you mean?" I replied, my voice trembling but steady. Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't recognize anymore. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You're old. You don't need this house. We do." My heart sank. She wasn't just being cruel, she was determined. This wasn't a phase, or stress, or Tom's influence. My daughter wanted me gone. I tried to remind her. "Emily, do you remember when your mother was sick? Who stayed by her side every night? Who sold his car so you could have your college tuition? Who?" She cut me off. "Stop living in the past. You did what any father was supposed to do. It doesn't mean you get to control my future." Control? That word burned. All I had ever wanted was her happiness. And now she twisted my sacrifices into chains. After she left the room, I overheard Tom again. "Don't worry," he whispered to her. "I've got a friend at the bank. Once the paperwork's sorted, the house will be in our names before he even realizes." I felt the blood drain from my face. Paperwork? Bank. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were plotting to steal everything while I was still alive. That night, I couldn't sit still. I opened the old chest in my closet where I kept my wife's belongings. Inside was her photo, smiling softly at me as if urging me to stay strong. I found the deed to the house, my will, and all the documents that proved this home was still mine. But for how long? When your own child conspires against you, there is no turning back. This was no longer just about family disagreements. This was war. And I knew then. I had to fight quietly, patiently. Because they thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. But they had forgotten. I was the one who built this life from nothing. And I wasn't about to let them tear it apart. The next days turned into a game of silence. Emily and Tom barely spoke to me unless it was about the future of the house. I pretended not to hear, though every word cut deeper than a knife. But inside, something in me shifted. I was no longer the helpless old man they thought I was. I began to listen more carefully, to notice patterns. Tom always left his laptop open when he went to shower. Emily carried her phone everywhere, but when she was distracted, I could glimpse her messages lighting up. One evening, I saw her texting. "We'll get the house papers signed once Dad agrees to move. Don't worry. It's almost done." My hands trembled, but my mind cleared. They weren't just dreaming of my absence. They were actively working to erase me. That night, I sat in the dim kitchen, sipping tea instead of coffee. My wife's picture still rested on the counter. "You always said patience is the strongest weapon," I whispered to her memory. "Maybe it's time to use it." The next morning, I acted differently. I greeted Tom with a smile, asked Emily if she wanted me to cook her favorite pancakes. She raised an eyebrow, suspicious, but said nothing. Let them think I was surrendering. Let them underestimate me. While they were out shopping, I called an old friend, Mark, my neighbor from years ago, now a lawyer. We hadn't spoken much since my wife's funeral, but his voice on the other end carried warmth. I explained everything. Emily's words, Tom's threats, the missing money, the bank papers. He listened quietly and then said, "Richard, don't sign a single thing. And keep every document you own safe. I'll help you." It was the first time in weeks I felt hope. That evening, over dinner, Tom suddenly announced, "Richard, we found a wonderful care home just outside the city. You'd have your own room, nurses, everything. Isn't that great?" I forced a gentle smile. "That does sound thoughtful." Emily's eyes lit up. "See, Dad? You'll be more comfortable there." and Tom and I will finally have the space to start our family." Their words were sweet, but their faces betrayed greed. They weren't planning to build a family. They were planning to build a kingdom on the ruins of mine. Inside, my blood boiled. But outside, I only nodded. "Let's talk about it tomorrow. I need some time." That night, I double-locked my door again and slid the documents under my mattress. My daughter thought my life was nearing its end. But in truth, my fight was only beginning. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the old porcelain cup in my hand. The air was heavy, almost electric. I knew the storm was coming. Emily and Tom wouldn't wait much longer. Sure enough, Tom walked in first, carrying a folder under his arm. Emily followed, her expression cold but determined. She didn't even say good morning. Instead, she placed the folder in front of me. "Dad," she said firmly, "these are the papers. It's just a formality. You'll be well taken care of in the home, and Tom and I will handle the house. All you need to do is sign." I looked down at the folder. The words property transfer agreement stared back at me. My hands tightened around the cup until I thought it would shatter. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly. Tom laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Richard, don't make this difficult. We're trying to help you. You're old. You don't need this burden." I stood slowly, my legs trembling, but my voice steady. "This isn't a burden. This is my home. The walls remember your mother's laughter, Emily. The garden remembers your little hands planting that oak tree. And you, both of you, want to erase it all for greed." Emily's face twisted. "Stop guilt-tripping me. You think because you gave me food and clothes, you own my future? You don't. I deserve this house. We deserve it." The room spun. For a moment, I thought my heart would give out. But then, something inside me snapped, not in weakness, but in clarity. "You don't deserve anything that comes from betrayal," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You may be my daughter, Emily, but today, you're a stranger to me." Her eyes burned with fury. "Fine. If you won't sign, then maybe the courts will make you. Or maybe, nature will take its course sooner than you think." Tom placed a hand on her shoulder, smirking. "Don't worry, Emily. Old men don't last forever." At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about the house. They truly wished me gone. Gone from the house, gone from their lives, maybe gone from this world. I didn't argue further. I simply walked back to my room, closed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I reached under the mattress to touch the documents hidden there. They were my only shield now. But I also knew I couldn't keep hiding. The storm was here, and it was time to fight back. That night, I sat in the dark, the folder of false promises still on the kitchen table. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time, from resolve. They thought I was powerless, an old man clinging to the past. But they forgot something. Age teaches patience, and patience builds strategy. I rose early the next morning, before either Emily or Tom stirred. The house was silent, bathed in a gray dawn. I quietly took the deed and my will from their hiding place and slipped them into a worn leather briefcase. Then I headed into town. Mark, my old friend and lawyer, greeted me with concern. "You look exhausted, Richard. What's happening?" I laid the papers on his desk and told him everything. Every cruel word, every stolen bill, every threat. He listened, eyes narrowing. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "They can't touch this house if your documents are in order," he said firmly. "But you need to protect yourself. I'll prepare a countermeasure, a legal shield. And Richard, start recording them. Words can be denied. Evidence cannot." His advice struck me like a spark. For weeks, I had been drowning in despair, but now I had a weapon. Not fists, not shouting, but truth. That evening, I returned home with a small digital recorder in my pocket. Emily and Tom were in the living room, talking in hushed voices. I sat in my armchair, pretending to doze off while the device in my pocket captured every word. "He's too stubborn," Emily whispered. "We need another way. Maybe we stop giving him his medications? He barely checks them anyway." Tom's voice followed, low and sharp. "If he slips, if something happens, no one will blame us. Old age takes people all the time." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. My daughter, my flesh and blood, plotting my slow disappearance as if it were nothing more than a convenience. But instead of confronting them, I kept still. Every poisonous word became another nail in their coffin, though they didn't know it yet. Later that night, I moved quietly through the house, setting up the recorder near the kitchen, where most of their scheming took place. Each click of the device felt like armor wrapping around me. When Emily passed me in the hallway, she glanced suspiciously. "You're awfully quiet lately, Dad." I forced a smile. "Just tired, Emily. Very tired." She smirked, mistaking silence for surrender. But in truth, my silence was the sharpest weapon I had ever held. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with shouting or fists. Sometimes it comes with patience, planning, and the moment when the betrayers realized the old man they underestimated was listening all along. The next days felt like walking on a knife's edge. Emily and Tom grew bolder, speaking openly about their plans, thinking my silence was surrender. They didn't know the walls of this house now held their words, preserved in cold, merciless recordings. One evening, I sat with Mark in his office again. I handed him the small recorder, its blinking red light still fresh in my memory. He listened carefully, his expression hardening with every second. "Richard," he said finally, "this isn't just about greed. What they're suggesting, denying you medication, pushing you out of your own home, this borders on attempted elder abuse. With this evidence, we can build a case. But you must be patient. The more they reveal, the stronger your shield will be." His words gave me both relief and dread. Relief, because I wasn't alone. Dread, because it meant I had to keep living under the same roof with two people who dreamed of my absence every day. When I came home that night, Emily greeted me with a strange smile. "Dad, you should let us take care of your pills from now on. You're forgetting too much." I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not forgetting, Emily. I remember everything." Her smile faltered for just a moment before she turned away. That night, I moved carefully around the house, planting another recorder under the couch in the living room, another in the kitchen drawer. Every corner of the home became a witness. A few days later, my suspicions proved right. Tom's voice echoed through the kitchen while I pretended to read in the garden. "We can't wait forever. If he doesn't sign soon, we'll change the locks when he's gone for the day. What's he going to do? Sleep on the street?" Emily hesitated, her tone colder than I ever imagined possible. "Fine, but we need to make it look like it was his decision. No one can suspect us." I clenched the recorder tighter in my pocket. Each word was another weapon, another shield for me. But the hardest part wasn't hearing their plotting. It was the silence that followed when I returned inside, sitting across from my daughter at dinner, pretending nothing was wrong, watching her eat calmly, while I knew she dreamed of my disappearance. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. My wife's voice echoed in my memory. "Patience, Richard. Don't let anger blind you." So I waited. I planned. And I whispered to the empty room. "They think they're clever. But when the time comes, they'll learn what it means to underestimate an old man who has nothing left to lose." Because quiet revenge is the sharpest kind. And mine had only just begun. The house no longer belonged to me. Not in spirit, not in warmth. I felt like a guest in the home I had built, a stranger among my own blood. Yet every creak of the stairs, every hushed word in the kitchen, every stolen glance reminded me. This was a battlefield now, and silence was my shield. Mark's words echoed in my head. "The more evidence you gather, the stronger your case will be." So I gathered. Every day, every night. While Emily thought I was napping in my armchair, I was listening. While Tom thought I was fumbling with the television remote, I was planting another recorder. The house had eyes and ears now, not theirs, but mine. One evening, Tom brought home a bottle of whiskey. He poured himself glass after glass, his voice growing louder with each sip. Emily tried to hush him, but his drunken bravado spilled out like poison. "He's useless," Tom slurred, slamming his glass on the table. "We feed him, we keep a roof over his head, and what does he give us? Nothing. That house is ours, Emily. I'll drag him out myself if I have to." Emily sighed, her patience thinning. "You don't understand. If it looks like we pushed him, the neighbors will talk. We need to make him want to leave. Or not wake up at all." My stomach twisted. Even drunk, their words carried intent. Intent that could end with me buried before my time. I sat in my room, recorder glowing faintly, capturing every syllable. My hands shook as I tucked it into the drawer, but my heart hardened. Their greed was no longer hidden. It was open, festering, undeniable. The next morning, I acted differently. I brewed coffee, humming softly as if nothing was wrong. Emily raised an eyebrow. "You're cheerful today." I smiled faintly. Life's too short to waste on worry. She didn't realize my words were double-edged, because while she plotted my end, I was preparing hers, the quiet, legal kind that leaves scars deeper than any knife. Later that day, I slipped out to Mark again. I placed the recorder on his desk, my voice low. They're not just after the house anymore. They're after me. He listened in silence, then leaned forward. Richard, we have enough to act. But the more rope you give them, the tighter the noose they'll make for themselves. Are you strong enough to keep enduring this? I closed my eyes, seeing my wife's face in my mind. Patience, Richard. Yes, I said firmly. I'll endure. Let them believe I'm weak. When I came back home, Emily greeted me with false sweetness. Dad, Tom and I were thinking, maybe we could all take a little trip. A cabin in the woods. Fresh air, quiet, it'll be good for you. Her words dripped with honey, but I tasted the poison underneath. A cabin in the woods. Remote. Quiet. A perfect place for an old man to slip and fall. I nodded slowly, hiding the storm raging inside. That sounds nice. Emily smiled, satisfied. Tom's smirk lingered a second too long. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, they think the cabin will be my grave. But they've forgotten, I've survived storms bigger than this. And this time, I won't be the one who falls. The stage was set. The trap was no longer theirs, it was mine. The car ride to the cabin was long and suffocating. Emily drove in silence, her hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. Tom sat in the passenger seat, humming along to the radio, every so often glancing back at me with that smug grin of his. I sat in the back seat, staring out at the blur of trees and fading daylight, my briefcase clutched on my lap. Inside it, carefully hidden, was the recorder and copies of the most damning evidence I had gathered so far. To them, I looked like a tired old man, dozing against the window. But inside, my mind raced, sharp and alive. I replayed every word Mark had told me before I left. Don't resist openly. Let them play their hand. And Richard, whatever happens, survive. The cabin stood deep in the woods, a lonely silhouette against the dying light. It should have been beautiful, the kind of place where families laughed over campfires and children roasted marshmallows. But the silence around it was wrong. Heavy. Final. Here we are, Emily said, her tone unervingly cheerful. She stepped out first, stretching her arms like she was welcoming peace. Tom opened the trunk, pulling out bags, while I climbed out slowly, my cane tapping against the dirt road. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood and dust. The furniture was old but sturdy. A fireplace stood cold and unused. Tom tossed the bags down and said, "This is perfect. Quiet. No neighbors. Just us." His words dripped with something darker than comfort. Emily cooked that evening. A stew. She placed a bowl in front of me, her smile too wide, her eyes too sharp. "Eat, Dad. You need your strength." I looked down at the steaming food, then back at her. My instinct screamed. I stirred it slowly with the spoon, but didn't take a bite. Instead, I coughed, pretending my throat was sore. "Not hungry," I muttered. Her smile faltered for a second. Tom frowned. "Suit yourself." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake on the creaking bed, listening. The walls were thin, and their whispers carried through the cabin. "We should do it tomorrow," Tom hissed. "One push down that ravine trail. Nobody will question it." Emily's reply was softer but sharper. "Careful. We make it look like an accident, or everything's ruined." I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding, but my mind steady. They had revealed their hand. The ravine. A fall. The perfect ending for an old man's story. But my story wasn't ending here. At dawn, I slipped out quietly, recorder in my pocket. I walked the trail they had mentioned, cane tapping against the ground, each step measured. Sure enough, the ravine appeared just a short way down the path, steep, jagged rocks waiting like open jaws. My breath caught. One stumble, one shove, and it would all be over. I placed the recorder carefully under a pile of leaves near the edge. If they tried, if they said anything here, the device would capture it all. When I returned, Emily and Tom were at the table, whispering until they noticed me. Emily forced a smile. "Sleep well, Dad." I sat down slowly, my voice calm, almost too calm. Better than I expected. Fresh air does wonders. They thought I was blind. They thought I was weak. But I was watching every move, hearing every word. And tomorrow, when they tried to write my ending, it would be theirs that began. Morning came cloaked in silence. No birds sang near the cabin. No breeze rustled through the trees. Only the crunch of footsteps on dry leaves broke the stillness as Emily and Tom coaxed me outside. "Let's take a little walk, Dad," Emily said, her voice sugar-sweet but stiff at the edges. "Fresh air will do you good." Tom stood behind her, his hands buried in his jacket pockets, eyes narrowed like a predator circling prey. I nodded, leaning heavily on my cane, my briefcase left behind in the cabin. Inside my pocket, however, the small recorder rested, its red light hidden, already whispering every sound into memory. We walked down the narrow trail. The ground dipped lower, roots snaking across the dirt, the trees closing in like silent witnesses. I let my steps falter, breathing hard, giving them the illusion of weakness. Emily slowed her pace, glancing back at me. "We're almost there," she murmured. Tom's lips curled into a grin. "Perfect spot for a view, huh, Richard?" I didn't reply. Ahead, the ravine yawned open, jagged rocks glinting faintly in the morning sun. One slip, one push, and the world would call it an accident. We reached the edge. Emily placed a hand on my arm, her grip too tight to be comforting. "Careful, Dad. It's a long way down." I looked at her, really looked. The daughter I once carried on my shoulders now stared at me with impatience, with hunger. My throat tightened, but my mind was sharp. Tom stepped closer. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. "Why drag this out, old man? Just sign the house over and save us the trouble." I steadied my cane, my voice calm despite the storm in my chest. "This is my house, my life, and you won't steal it with lies and threats." He sneered. "Then maybe nature will decide for you." His hand twitched at my back. I shifted just enough to make him stumble against a loose stone. He cursed, regaining his balance. But in that instant the recorder in my pocket caught it all. His intent, his threat, his attempt. Emily's voice rose, panicked. "Not here, Tom. Not like this." Her words were a confession in themselves. I stared at the ravine, the abyss yawning below. My knees ached, my heart pounded, but I whispered inwardly to my wife's memory. "I won't give them the satisfaction." Turning slowly, I looked them both in the eyes. "You think I'm weak. But weakness isn't in these bones, it's in your greed." Their faces twisted, Emily's pale with shock, Tom's red with anger. They hadn't expected resistance. I straightened, gripping my cane like a soldier holding a weapon. My voice cut through the trees. "This ends soon. And when it does, the only ones falling will be you." I turned back toward the cabin, leaving them stunned at the ravine's edge. Behind me, I heard Tom spit on the ground and mutter, "He won't make it much longer." But every step I took was a promise. I would outlast them. And when the time came, the truth would bury them deeper than any ravine could. Back at the cabin, the silence was suffocating. Emily avoided my eyes, pacing nervously near the fireplace. Tom slammed cupboards, pretending to look for food, but clearly seething at how the morning had unfolded. Their plan had cracked, but not broken. They would try again. I knew it. I sat calmly in the armchair, cane resting against my knee, my recorder still humming quietly in my pocket. The weight of it steadied me. Every word they had spat near that ravine was now mine to use against them. "Dad," Emily finally said, her voice brittle, "you shouldn't wander too close to the cliffs. You'll hurt yourself." I looked at her, my tone dry. "Don't worry, Emily. I'm very careful. More careful than you think." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned away, muttering something to Tom. That night, when the cabin settled into uneasy silence, I pretended to sleep. Through the thin wall, I heard them whispering again. "We need to finish this," Tom hissed. "One way or another. He's not going to hand over the house." Emily's voice cracked. "Then make it look like an accident. I can't live in that house with him forever." Her words pierced deeper than any knife. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, spoke of me as though I were a piece of old furniture she was desperate to throw away. I gripped the recorder tighter beneath my blanket, every nerve in my body screaming. But I stayed silent. Silence was survival. At dawn, I slipped out, claiming I wanted fresh air. Instead, I walked down the dirt road until I found enough signal for my phone to catch. With shaking hands, I called Mark. "Richard, are you safe?" he asked, his voice sharp with worry. "For now," I whispered. "But it won't last. I have everything. Their words, their threats, even at the ravine." I'm bringing it back to you. No, Mark cut in firmly. Don't come back alone. Call the sheriff in town first. Bring the recordings to the police station. I'll meet you there. His calm steadied me, though my pulse hammered in my ears. I had lived a life of patience, raising a family, burying a wife, enduring loneliness. But this patience was different. This was a patience that would end in fire. When I returned to the cabin, Emily tried to smile. Dad, are you hungry? I can make breakfast. I studied her face, the familiar features twisted by greed and desperation. I shook my head. Not today. Her smile cracked, suspicion flashing in her eyes. Tom glared openly now, no longer hiding his disdain. You're tougher than you look, old man. But toughness won't last forever. I leaned on my cane, meeting his stare. Neither will lies. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. Small but real. That evening, as they argued in hushed tones near the kitchen, I slipped quietly into my room and began gathering my things. The recorder, the deed copies, every scrap of evidence. Tomorrow, I would leave this cabin, not as their victim, but as the man who would end their charade once and for all, because they thought the woods would swallow me. But instead, the truth would swallow them. I woke before sunrise. The cabin was still, the air heavy with the damp smell of old wood and smoke from last night's fire. My heart pounded as I slid the recorder and the bundle of documents into my leather briefcase. The decision was made. Today, I would leave this place and end their game. I moved quietly, cane tapping softly against the floorboards as I stepped into the main room. For a brief moment, I thought I was free. The door was just a few steps away. Freedom was within reach. Then Emily's voice cut through the silence. Where are you going, Dad? She stood at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed, her face pale in the dim light. Tom appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes, though his smirk told me he'd been awake. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. Just for a walk. I need some air. Emily's eyes narrowed. With your briefcase? My hand tightened on the handle. Old habits, I muttered, though the lie tasted bitter. Tom stepped closer, blocking part of the doorway. You're hiding something. I steadied my breath, leaning heavier on my cane. I'm hiding nothing but my age. Now step aside. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Emily burst out, her voice sharp with panic. He's going to ruin everything. He knows, Tom. Tom's expression hardened. You're not going anywhere, Richard. The tension snapped like a wire. I lifted my cane, slamming it against the wooden floor. The sound echoed through the cabin, sharp and commanding. This is my life, my home, and you will not cage me like an animal. For the first time, Emily flinched. Perhaps she saw in my eyes the fire of the man who once worked 2 jobs, who fought through poverty to give her everything. Not the frail father she thought she could erase. Tom, however, only sneered. Fine, have your walk, but don't expect to find your way back. He stepped aside, his grin dark, his threat clear. I gripped the handle of my briefcase tighter and stepped into the cold morning air. My breath fogged in front of me as I walked down the dirt path, each step slower than I wished, but firmer than they expected. Behind me, I heard the cabin door slam, followed by muffled voices. They would come after me. I knew it. The question was when. The woods closed around me, branches clawing at my jacket as I pressed forward. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I kept moving. Every step carried me closer to town, closer to Mark, closer to the law. Then, footsteps. Behind me. Fast. Heavy. Richard. Tom's voice thundered through the trees. You're not walking away from this. I quickened my pace, the trail winding toward the road. My cane struck against a rock, sending a jolt of pain up my arm, but I didn't stop. The briefcase bounced at my side, the weight of truth urging me forward. The footsteps drew closer. My heart hammered. The ravine was not far, the very place they had planned for me. My breath caught as I realized. If they caught me here, it would end exactly as they wanted. But I wasn't the same man they thought I was. I veered sharply off the trail, into the thicker woods, branches tearing at my sleeves. My pulse roared in my ears, but a strange calm spread through me. Every step away from them was a step toward survival. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. Branches snapped behind me, the sound of pursuit growing louder. Tom's voice carried through the trees, harsh and breathless. Richard, you can't run forever. My lungs burned, each breath ragged, but I pressed forward. My cane dug into the damp ground, keeping me upright as the briefcase thumped against my side. Every step felt like a lifetime, but the thought of surrendering, of letting them bury me like a broken branch, lit fire in my veins. I veered off the narrow trail, plunging into thicker undergrowth. Leaves slapped my face, roots caught my shoes, but I didn't stop. Behind me, Emily's voice rose, desperate and furious. "Dad, stop. You're only making this worse." Worse? How could it be worse than my own child plotting my death? Their words pushed me harder than fear ever could. The forest opened suddenly, revealing a shallow stream cutting across the path. My foot slipped on a slick stone, sending me to my knees. Pain shot up my leg, but I clutched the briefcase tight and forced myself upright. Water soaked through my trousers as I splashed across, the icy sting jolting me awake. On the far bank, I paused just long enough to listen. The footsteps were close now, Tom crashing through the brush like a charging bull, Emily trailing behind. Their anger fueled them, but their rage also made them careless. I took a sharp left, following the stream deeper into the woods, letting the water mask my tracks. My heart pounded, but my mind sharpened. This wasn't just escape anymore. It was survival by cunning. For what felt like an eternity, I stumbled forward, until the trees thinned and the faint sound of an engine reached my ears. A road. Civilization. I pushed through the last of the brush and saw it. An old pickup truck parked near the trailhead, its driver leaning against the hood, smoking. A stranger. His face weathered, clothes simple, but his eyes alert. He looked up as I burst out of the woods, clutching my briefcase like a lifeline. "Hey, you all right, sir?" he called, flicking away his cigarette. Before I could answer, Tom's voice roared from behind me. "Old man, don't you dare run." The stranger's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, positioning himself between me and the sound of approaching footsteps. "You in trouble?" I nodded, my voice shaking but firm. "Yes, and I need to get to town. Now." The man didn't hesitate. He opened the passenger door. "Get in." I scrambled into the truck, heart hammering. Seconds later, Tom and Emily burst from the tree lean, their faces twisted with fury. Emily shouted, "Dad, wait. He's confused. Don't listen to him." The driver glanced at me, then back at them, unimpressed. "Doesn't look confused to me." He climbed behind the wheel, started the engine, and without another word, pulled onto the road. I looked back through the rear window. Tom's face was red with rage, his fist shaking in the air. Emily stood frozen, her lips trembling, her eyes burning with betrayal. As the cabin and the forest shrank behind me, a wave of relief and sorrow washed over me. My daughter, my blood, had chased me like prey through the woods. But now, for the first time in weeks, I was moving towards safety. I clutched the briefcase tighter, whispering to myself, "This isn't over. The law will hear your voices, Emily, and then the world will know who you really are." The truck roared down the empty road, carrying me toward town, and toward the beginning of their end. The ride into town felt unreal, as if the world itself had shifted. The truck's engine hummed steadily, but inside my chest, my heart raced like a war drum. I sat in silence, clutching the briefcase, the weight of it heavier than stone. Inside were weeks of whispers, threats, and poison, the truth that would save me. The driver, whose name I learned was Jack, glanced at me a few times as we drove. His voice was calm but curious. "You got people chasing you, old man. What's their business with you?" I tightened my grip on the briefcase. "They want me gone. My own daughter. Her husband. They want my house, my life. But I've got proof." Jack's eyes hardened. He didn't press further. Instead, he nodded toward the horizon. "Sheriff's station is just ahead. We'll get you there." When the truck pulled up in front of the small-town police station, I felt my knees weaken. Jack helped me out, steadying me with a strong hand. "You'll be safe now," he said firmly. I met his eyes, gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thank you. You may have just saved my life." Inside, the air smelled of old paper and coffee. A young deputy at the desk looked up, startled by my disheveled state. "Sir, are you all right?" I placed the briefcase on the counter, my voice low but steady. "I need to speak with the sheriff. It's about my daughter and her husband. And I have evidence." Minutes later, I sat across from Sheriff Daniels, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes but a sharp gaze. I opened the briefcase and pulled out the recorder, setting it gently on his desk. "Play it," I said simply. The room filled with Emily's voice, cold and cutting. "We should do it tomorrow. One push down that ravine trail. Nobody will question it." Then Tom's drunken snarl followed. Old men don't last forever. The sheriff's expression darkened with every word. He leaned forward, his hands folded tightly. "Mr. Miller, this is serious. Elder abuse, conspiracy, attempted harm. You did the right thing bringing this to us." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I loved her. She was my little girl. And now, my voice cracked. Now she wants me gone. For a long moment, the sheriff said nothing. Then he placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll handle this. You're not alone anymore." Mark arrived soon after, his face pale but determined. He hugged me briefly, something he hadn't done in years. "Richard, you did it. You endured long enough to catch them in their own trap." I felt tears sting my eyes, though I fought them back. For weeks, I had carried this weight alone, choking on betrayal in the silence of my home. And now, finally, the silence was broken. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "We'll need you to testify. But with this evidence, they won't walk away free." I nodded slowly. "I'll testify. I'll tell the world what they tried to do." Outside, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small town. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply, not in fear, but in relief. Yet deep inside, pain lingered. No matter what the law did, no matter how much justice I gained, the wound of betrayal from my own child would never fully heal. Still, one truth steadied me. I was no longer their prey. I was a survivor. And now, it was their turn to tremble. The next morning, Sheriff Daniels himself drove me back toward the cabin. His squad car cut through the misty road, red and blue lights muted against the trees. 2 deputies followed behind in another car. My stomach churned, but not from fear. From finality. The end of this long nightmare was near. As we pulled up, Emily and Tom were already outside, pacing by the porch. Their faces froze when they saw the cars. Emily's eyes widened with panic. Tom's jaw clenched in anger. The sheriff stepped out first. "Emily Miller? Tom Harris? We need to speak with you." Tom sneered. "What's this about?" I opened my door, cane steady beneath me. Their eyes locked onto me, and in that moment I saw everything. Emily's fear, Tom's fury. The sheriff pressed play on the recorder. Emily's voice filled the morning air, cold and undeniable. "We should do it tomorrow. One push down that ravine trail. Nobody will question it." Tom lunged forward. "That's fake. He's lying." But the sheriff held up a hand. "We also have witnesses to your threats, and enough recordings to make this airtight." Emily's face crumbled. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "Dad, please, you don't understand. We were desperate, we." I lifted my hand, silencing her. My heart ached as I looked at her. My little girl who once clung to me after nightmares, who once called me her hero. Now she stood before me, trembling not from love, but from exposure. "You said the best gift would be the day I'm gone," I whispered. My voice cracked, but my gaze stayed firm. "Well, Emily, today you gave me another gift. The truth. And it will follow you into every courtroom, every cell, every restless night." Tears streamed down her face. Tom cursed loudly as the deputies moved in, handcuffing him first. He struggled, spitting words like venom. "You're finished, old man. You'll die alone." I met his glare steadily. Better alone than surrounded by snakes. Emily didn't resist when the cuffs clicked around her wrists. She just kept whispering, "Dad, Dad, please," as if the word could undo what had already been done. But her voice was hollow. The bond was broken long before this morning. The deputies led them both to the cars. I stood with the sheriff, my body trembling, my soul heavy. "It's over," he said quietly. I nodded, though my eyes burned. Over for them, not for me. Because though justice had come, the scar of betrayal would remain. My home would feel emptier than ever, the laughter in those walls forever tainted by greed and cruelty. Later, back at the house, I sat in my old chair, the porcelain cup resting on the table beside me. The oak tree outside swayed gently in the wind. I remembered Emily's little hands planting it, her laughter ringing like bells. I closed my eyes, whispering to the memory of my wife. "I survived, Margaret. I did what I had to, but it cost me more than I ever thought it would." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the living room. The house was mine again, safe, silent. Yet the silence was no longer heavy with fear. It was heavy with truth. And truth, no matter how painful, was my final victory. Because they thought they could erase me. But I remained. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's simply living long enough to watch those who betrayed you answer for every word.